Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Cheers with me, Kevin Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, ultimately effective results. Joining me today is marketing leadership segment, marketing communications expert and co-host Craig Page-Lee. How you doing, Craig?
Kevin, I'm great. Yeah, thank you. We are in the beginning of a new month of conversations. But before getting into that, just firstly, how are you doing? I know you've been incredibly busy the last few weeks, eh?
Yes, Craig. Like I was saying just before we jumped online, I teach it, but and shout out to Lauren because she's going to moan at me for wearing white on this background. But I've been incredibly busy with building business and getting out there and getting in front of people, but also there's a lot of change that's happening from my perspective of rebranding and stuff. And one of the things that I just mentioned to you earlier now was and it's a concept that I teach and I sometimes forget. Action creates motion.
Yeah, I love that principle. I really do.
Yeah, and it's very simplified, but in the simplicity of it is if and I always ask this, especially from a coaching perspective, from a sales perspective, you're like, what amount of action are you taking? And I'll give you a quick example. I was speaking to someone in an environment recently, in a sales environment, and they were stuck. They were literally like, I don't know what to do, don't know how, like I don't know. And I was like, okay, so how many people have you spoken to in this building today? And he had this frown on him. and he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, how many people have you spoken to in this building today? You're saying that you want to hustle, you want to get things done, you want to make things happen. I said, between now and the next time I see you, you should at least speak to 100 people. And he's like, his eyes like opened up. I was like, yeah, speak to 100 people, right? Because of those 100 people, you're probably going to get 10 people who are going to give you answers or insights or information to a degree that you didn't anticipate or you simply aren't seeing based on the fact that you're stuck in the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the whole point of action creates motion. Right.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
You may not experience the outcome in the very moment, in that moment or that month. But the pure momentum, I mean, you and I, we're working on the TV show, it's taken time, but if you look at where we are to where we were and how it's evolving into this complete thing, it's amazing. So yeah, it's beautiful and it's been great. But Craig, you've just come back from a trip from Namibia.
Yeah, I'll jump into that now, but I really liked what you've just described, Kevin, and it makes me think of the term, work in progress, which is such a wonderful term because that's what it really is at the end of the day, where you're putting the efforts and mechanics in place and the end result is imminent or due, and that is the work in progress approach.
Craig, and I think we sometimes miss it, right? We sometimes miss the whole point of work, right? Yes, the work is an outcome and the work is, something you want to achieve, but it's always in progress. It's, it's the journey of work. It's the evolution of who you are becoming. And when you lean into the becomingness of self, you kind of go, there's so much to lean into. If you just take that approach to, okay, so I'm here, in what direction do I want to lean more into? And in that that leaning and taking action towards it, that process is the point.
Yes, and it has to start somewhere, and that's key. So just jumping back, Windhoek, another visit to Windhoek, really an amazing place. Just coming in over the desert and these little mountains that surround the city, very sort of flat kind of city, low scape in terms of no high-rise buildings and the likes. Incredible people. Really positive people, quite humble in many respects. And we spoke about this to the client we were there with, sorry, let's make that straight, that we were kicking the project off with, just, in terms of how they all lean in and support each other in a very small market of, probably 3 million total population. There's a high percentage of unemployment. So, they really look to bond well and find opportunities and support each other within the work opportunity space. And they, in a way, sort of, look very, very carefully at consultants coming into their market. So it was really good to get that insight from the CEO of the business we're chatting to, but also some really interesting areas of development moving forward in the country. Obviously, there were some fossil fuel finds off the coast, and I know that is an area of development that the country is focusing in. There's green energy. Some people may or may not like that particular proposition, but I've picked up that there's a lot of focus on building a manufacturing, industrialized economy, and the country really needs it. But great people, clean, safe. We walk the streets with laptops on our shoulders, going between meetings and things like that. And it was incredible. Yeah, got back late last night and dived straight into another busy day.
Yeah, and Craig, what's always nice when you hear it from that context is, especially when you're working with a business in a different country, it's just like you're part of something they're creating, right?
Yes.
I always look at it like it's another feather in your cap kind of thing. So brilliant to even be part of something like that.
It's exciting.
Craig, so as we start today's show, last weekend we had some interesting conversations around the 4 leadership principles that drive company culture. Don't you just want to give us a bit of a synopsis of what we did cover?
Yes, Kevin, thanks for that. We focused on an article titled, as you mentioned, Leadership Now, 4 leadership principles that drive company culture. The article was published on fastcompany.com on the 1st of June this year. So again, very relevant information. And the article was written by Amish Divatia, a Forbes Technology Council member. And the reason, again, that the article stood out for me is that it addresses core and often complex principles in business into really simple to understand and apply concepts and models. And in this particular instance, Amish Divatia references those 4 leadership principles that drive company culture as the 4 I's. And I really like the way he simplified it into the 4 I's, these being noted as the first I, which principle 1 is instinct. The second I, principle 2, is integrity. The third I, principle 3, is intensity. And the fourth I, principle 4, is inclusion. And the article defines the leadership values that these principles stands for and gives some wonderful context on how to implement them when driving company culture. And when you read the article and you get to understand the definition behind those words, just such beautiful, simple principles that are easy to apply, and that actually every single leadership level individual should have insight to.
Absolutely, Greg, and I guys, if you want to go, it's a really nice conversation that we had around those 4 leadership principles. Go and check it out on the Lunchtime Series or any major podcast channel. But Craig, moving on to our new theme for this month, what do you have in store for today's conversation?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. Yes, so we're moving from our month of covering leadership, management, and business performance-related topics, and we're moving to focusing on a month of marketing, media, and communications-related topics. And just for our listeners, again, we alternate between the two every 2 months. And to start off for this area of focus, I want to cover a detailed report I came across quite recently, in fact, probably in the last 4 days on McKinsey.com, titled State of Consumer 2024, What's Now and What's Next? Before getting into some of the juice behind it, just to advise that the report was written by Christina Adams, a cohort of writers from McKinsey.com, Christina Adams, Carrie Eldridge, and Sanjay Cole. Report was published again as recently as 10th of June 2024. So really great to see these fresh insights that are informing us as to what's happening into the rest of 2024 at a consumer level, and actually what the changes and expectations are moving forward. And believe me, I was quite surprised at some of those changes. But it's worth noting up front, Kevin, that we actually have addressed some of the concepts that are referenced in this particular article in different publications, in different articles. But it's wonderful to see the collective of these particular topics coming together in this report, and it makes for really interesting reading and presents a wonderful new topic for our discussion. So that having been said, the article opens with a following statement, which consists of 2 paragraphs, Kevin, and goes to this point. If you think you know consumer behavior, think again. Middle-income consumers are feeling the squeeze and worrying about inflation, but aren't holding back on splurges. Rather than sticking to the tight budgets in retirement, aging consumers are splurging too. Speaking of older shoppers, it turns out that the brand loyalty they've long been known for is a thing of the past, and young consumers in the likes of Asia and the Middle East are more likely than those in Western markets to switch to higher-priced brands. These are just some of the large-scale shifts taking place in the global consumer landscape. Consumers have continued to defy expectations and behave in atypical ways, keeping consumer goods manufacturers and retailers on their toes. More than ever, companies that cultivate a detailed, up-to-date understanding of today's and tomorrow's consumers, who they are, what they want, and where they are and how they shop, will best be positioned to succeed.
Craig, what's interesting about this is middle income consumers, and I am not an avid viewer of politics, but if you look at Kamala Harris, the presidential candidate in the US currently, it is a specific target market that she's looking at and saying, with Donald Trump doing what he's doing, he's looking at high income earners and letting them get away with a lot, where her entire campaign is specifically aimed at middle income consumers, because it's a large chunk of the entire population, right?
It is by all means.
So interestingly enough, it's the fact that this has come out, and this is 2024. We're talking about this document being written recently. You can see, from large economies, what's happening. Even the type of economics that countries are looking at, aiming at, speaks to exactly the same segment, because these are the people that drive economy.
Yes. Now, what really is quite fortuitous that I chose this topic for today's conversation, because there were 2 things that totally unrelated to this article. In honesty, is listening to the radio, going to meetings today, 2 key things stood out. One is they spoke about the incredible positive performance of Shoprite Checkers Group. And then there was a conversation in sort of the opposite direction, where the conversation was around what are middle income to low income consumers doing in South Africa to save, and what have they given up in their buying repertoire to make ends meet. And it was just wonderful that the 2 came together. And the first is, Shoprite Checkers Group is shot the lights out. It's had incredible growth. They've opened a significant number of extra stores this year, and they've really focused on giving back to the consumer. And I think one of the critical factors for us as a country is the control on inflationary increases, and that has been passed down into the retail FMCG space, where Shoprite Checkers in particular have seen a reduction on food inflationary rises, and reduced from about what was it, 15% to about 7.5%. I get the figures wrong, but there was a significant reduction in FMCG consumer goods inflationary increase, which is a direct benefit to the pocket of consumers. So, if you do have a moment to pick that up while we're chatting, if you can just quickly search it and see what benefit they've brought. But they've shut the lights out, and they've really positioned their group to meet the needs and challenges of tough economic times for that large segment who have eaten away the bottom segment of the top brands like Woolworths, etc. Are buying down, and then some of the shoppers and the likes of Pick and Pay who are now switching across to the value and to the culture and offering of the likes of Shoprite Checkers, definitely helping that organization see significant growth. But then on the other side, on 702, was the conversation around what are consumers actually leaving out of their repertoires, things that they would just automatically having gone and spent on, to actually now consciously make a decision to leave out of the repertoire because they want to put some more money into the bank, into the savings, or pay back some of those debts that they incurred coming out of COVID. So great that we're talking retail and consumer today based on two pieces of supporting thinking on radio in South Africa. Did you come across any stats there on Shoprite by any chance?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the big changes that Shoprite Checkers is literally taking right now is how do you feed a family of 4 for 20 Rand, right? So asking questions to that degree, right? Another one is the service has exceeded or expanded to 505 stores, achieving a 63.1% increase in sales over 6 months.
Phenomenal.
So when you hear it at that degree, and I think that's what speaks to what great companies do. How do you feed a family of 4 with 20 Rand? That's immediately kind of goes, oh, that's insane. Like how do you do that, right? But the fact that they're asking that question and making it happen is the point.
Exactly that, Kevin. So to reiterate, going into this particular report, which looks at 9 trends defining the global consumer market, I genuinely believe that the Shoprite Checkers Group clearly understand who their consumer is. And the beauty about this report is it's now looking at who the future consumer is.
So tell us about the trends.
Okay, yes. So just quick point on the methodology conducted in the research that was used to produce the results of this report. To forecast where the global consumer landscape is, McKinsey surveyed more than 15,000 consumers in 18 markets, Kevin, making up 90% of global GDP. And the findings from this study actually revealed surprising nuances about the demographic groups, and to quote you, seemingly contradictory consumer behaviors and categories poised for growth. And I'm sure that the likes of the Shoprite Checkers and that are conducting these same levels of in-depth investigation into the South African market. That's why they've been able to so successfully position their business and really sweep the floor with the competitors. So, point I made is, who is the future consumer? And the key point to start the conversation with, to take note of, is the consumers no longer fit into traditional archetypes, Kevin. And some of the most influential consumers of tomorrow are currently underserved, whether they're sitting in the lower segments where brands aren't talking to them because they feel that there's not enough income to engage in the brand, or they're sitting in communities and clusters that just haven't been reached effectively. The first point to start with is that young people in emerging markets most definitely are one of the most important future consumers. And the report notes that by 2030, 75% of consumers in emerging markets will be between the ages of 15 and 34. And when you overlay that and look at the average age of consumers, into 2030 in Africa, Africa fits right into that blockhold, and we're going to have one of the youngest populations in the world in the next few years, and obviously one of the biggest consumer market opportunities. These consumers are definitely optimistic about their own respective economies, and what we are beginning to see is that there's a willingness to spend based on the markets that were covered, that being Middle East, Africa, and Asia in particular. Go for it, Kevin.
No, I just wanted to say, Craig, what a time to be alive, right? Because you and I have, at our ages, we kind of have come from an old school way of thinking that, this is how leadership is done. This is how marketing is done. This is how you run business. And, when you're seeing the evolution of how consumers are literally dictating what they want, who they are, where they're spending their money, it literally, for you and I, we're seeing in real time the evolution of how trends in business are literally changing. And consumers, quite specifically clients, your customer base is literally dictating to you, this is what we want and this is how we want it. And we're part of that evolution and seeing it in real time. It's completely fascinating.
It is, and on that very point one, still the young people in emerging markets. What is interesting there, that young consumers aged between 18 and 24, Kevin, are really important to consumer businesses, and the brands really need to take cognizance of their behavior, because given their pent-up demand and willingness to spend, they are expected to spend up to twice any other segment, meaning they opt for higher priced brands and retailers. So they want to spend up, and they're going to spend twice as much. So brands really do need to lean into this particular age group, 18 to 24. Given their pent-up demand and willingness to spend, they indicate a strong desire to spend on premium products, so much that they are likely up to 2 times more likely to trade up. Now, for me, that was one really great revelation to start the conversation on. Firstly, where is their income coming from is the question I have.
Well, as an emerging age, right? So these are youngsters that are either entering into university, or just kind of leaving university to some extent. So but what's interesting about that, it's the same generation that's also in the workforce currently demanding better work environments, better leadership, better climate control, better what are we doing about our lives, right? So it's interesting to see that correlation of this segment and generation pushing the narrative. So obviously,
and Kevin, I think that comes on the back of their optimism. They've been through. We've all been through a really tough time running into COVID, coming out of COVID, but this generation seems to have embraced coming out of COVID with a lot more positivity and willingness to, take the next step to their own positive futures there. And really, this group is a magnificent opportunity for future consumption.
Yeah, absolutely.
The flip side of that is the oldies, those that are retired and ready to spend, also ready to spend, but for different reasons. They've obviously been stashing the cash during their working years. Longer life expectancies and declining birth rates, as we know, in advanced economies, the not well-established economies, birth rates are still on the increase, but in the advanced economies, we're definitely seeing a decline in birth rates. But definitely the long life expectancies are pushing global population of people older than 35 to increase at a rate much quicker than the growth of the population of younger people, Kevin. And so despite the financial constraints that obviously comes with retirement, aging consumers across all income levels covered in the report note that they're willing to spend on discretionary items. And I think this is one of the points we picked up in the past with the likes of travel as a discretionary item. So definitely a bit of big spender focus coming back into the equation. But in emerging markets, it's not just the younger consumers are ready to spend, but their parents as well. So interesting to see the collective, the family collective, being referenced here. And wealthy aging consumers in emerging markets are definitely more optimistic, and they spend more on those discretionary items that I mentioned, and they definitely plan on treating themselves more than wealthy aging consumers in advanced markets. And for me, that was an interesting take out there as well. So I don't know exactly what the trigger is there, but it's quite encouraging to see that the stockpiling, the working hard during the tough years, putting that money back into the economy. Wonderful.
Craig, you mentioned birth rate. I was just checking quickly online. China, yes, which we know has had a significant population, their birth rate has declined by 50% in between 2016 and 2023, with only 9 million births recorded in 2023 to compare to 17.8 million in 2016. So, it's really a substantial movement of generations that kind of going, actually, we're prioritizing other things, and having families not one of them.
Yeah, Kevin, that's a significant percentage, eh? So just the closeout point on that particular area of focus was that consumer businesses that are marketing exclusively to younger consumers are definitely missing out on a big slice of the potential, and at risk if they ignore wealthy aging consumers, particularly in evolving economies, Kevin. Then the lovely ham sandwich, there's the slice in between, and this is the squeezed but splurging middle. And here we note that at the cost of living is definitely increasing, but this squeezed splurging middle will continue to put pressure on the middle income. At least the state of the economies will continue to put pressure on this particular middle income consumer. They do, however, plan to splurge on some discretionary items, but definitely at a rate that is comparable with that of high income consumers. Now, this was interesting for me because the high income consumers are spending less and are very defined in their discretionary spend, in the same way that this really ham sandwich middle layer is. And we've got the emerging economies spending much more than these established economies. So that was quite an interesting takeout here. And the intent is to splurge, but across various categories, including experience-based categories, which is wonderful to see. Again, travel coming out in this classification, but dining out, as well as groceries and some other discretionary goods. The middle income consumers might typically be expected to delay purchases during economical challenging times, which obviously has led to some kind of stockpiling and savings. And I think as the economies are starting to settle around the world, or in some key markets, they probably are at that point where they now want to go out and splurge and feel that the time is right to do that without compromising themselves too much. Go for it.
No, I'm just going to say, Craig, it's because that middle sector has gone through the toughest time.
Yeah.
They're just splurging.
Yeah, it's really the comparison to the higher established economies was really an interesting one, but we'll get to that point as we move through. The one thing that the report asks is, what will consumers want and what do they want next? And what they want is also changing as they're evolving through the different age categories, as they're evolving into emerging into emerged markets. Those changes obviously are inevitable. So weakened brand loyalty, affordability, over sustainability, and heightened interest in wellness products and services reflect that their preferences and priorities of consumers across all ages and categories are changing, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point 4 of those nine areas of focus is brand exploration, and I love this because if you just pick up on the topic of ShopRite checkers that we spoke about a few minutes ago, that is purely on the back of brand exploration at a grosser, big box FMCG retailer level. And then within the mix of the product offering within those stores, there's definitely brand exploration and inevitably a lot of white labeled, exclusive premium white label goods being consumed in those environments as well. But talking about consumers back in the article, when they couldn't find exactly what they needed because of the pandemic era supply chain disruptions, about 50% of consumers switched their products or brands, Kevin. And this behavioral changes is proven very, very sticky. Consumers continue to be open to exploring alternatives, and brand loyalty is obviously therefore fading across various demographic groups. And I think it's going to be really tough and a lot of effort and investment to get those that have switched back into the premium brand space there, Kevin. In the advanced markets, over 30% of the consumers have tried different brands. Approximately 40% have switched retailers in search of better prices and discounts. And inflation and economic uncertainty are definitely key drivers in enabling this particular behavior. So yeah, just talking around weakening brand loyalty, it's not limited to specific age group, Kevin's. In the past, older consumers have always remained consistent and loyal to their brands of preference, but today, they're equally likely to embrace new brands and retailers across the board. So brand loyalty is really an area of focus we must look at in this month, to see how these changing dynamics of shifting patterns in age group spend and shifting patterns in economic value are impacting on loyalty.
But just considering the brand exploration, it's probably a TikTok video or a conversation I had with someone. Even the brand influences are changing. So where brands would generally support someone who has great influence or a large social media following, brands are even considering a different approach on who their influencer is. So there's a conversation happening currently where they're going, why are we paying Kim Kardashian to kind of do this brand thing for us when we have really good, sound, educated, expert, specialist people out in the world wanting to change the world for better? Why are we not supporting those people? So even the narrative around who the brands are attaching themselves to is being called into question, which is also part of that brand exploration part.
And what I love about that is it talks to the trust factor as well, because while you have influencers, you just can't have a smorgasbord of influencers, those with big names, just because you think that followers are going to come on the back of that. The ability to see through that veneer is ever apparent, and it's about influencers who are in the communities of which the brands exist that are more trustworthy and notable, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fifth one is a really interesting one, because we've had some wonderful conversations around sustainability. But what's quite interesting here, I know we did mention the point of it flipping on its head a good few months ago. This point has come up again, where it says value upstages values. And values were driving decision making on sustainability, and people were voting with their hands on their hearts around products and what they stand for. But in this instance, the value of the brand experience is superseding the values that are represented. And in recent years, young consumers in this particular survey and previous surveys have clearly prioritized sustainability considerations when making their purchases. And interesting, there's a lovely reference to the United States here. It says that it wasn't all talk in the United States. Sales of products with sustainability related claims outpaced sales of products without such claims. And we've covered that in quite a bit of detail in one or two of our conversations before. But young consumers, they do still say that they care about sustainability, but they are making clear trade-offs in the face of some of the challenges that we've seen, economic challenges, obviously driven by inflation as well. And take note of this stat. In Europe and the United States, fewer Gen Zers and millennials rank sustainability claims an important purchasing factor at the beginning of 2024 than 2023. And it's a significant percentage. When you look across the various regions of the study, there's a much bigger weighting on the value of a product versus their own values, and younger generations are now de-emphasizing the importance of sustainability in their purchase decisions, but by factors. If you look at the chart that the table that at least the report includes there, Kevin. The other point that we note is that younger consumers aren't just deprioritizing sustainability in the purchase decisions. They've also become less willing to pay a premium for sustainable products, and that is a factor that we spoke about quite a bit in the past. Is that adhering to sustainable practices and buying into sustainable businesses often comes at a higher price, and directly on the back of some of the economical challenges and inflation, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. These younger generations and consumers are really taking heed of that and needing to take a step back from the sustainability pledge and alignment to seeing what's in the wallet, and therefore needing to buy down, and therefore they're having to look for value as opposed to moving into that values space, Kevin.
Well, it's interesting, and now I'm kind of curious because it'd be interesting to kind of look at this segment and these generations were driving the agenda of sustainability, and suddenly it's starting to change. So the question is like, well, why is it changing? What is the change? What is the change? What is pushing that agenda? But again, if you look at the economy of the world, and the unfortunate dire straits that the world is going through, that could be a factor that's impacting like world wars and crazy authoritarian leaders in the world. That could impact decision making quite a lot.
Yeah, Kevin, most definitely. At the end of the day, economics and world policies are impacting on everything, and the economies of these particularly evolving nations really have felt it. And as much as we're surprised that they taking a step back from values to value, I don't think they are turning their backs on those brands. They are in a moments in time needing to make some other fundamental decisions. And honestly, I don't think that consumers who've supported brands based on values will step away from values as a priority in choosing a brand. I think they'll look at the more values driven, value driven brands with the same lens, but maybe they're not as expressive and as articulate in the definition of what their values are. So I don't think they're turning in the opposite direction. I think it's a case of just needing to not place as much emphasis on values, still taking the principle of adhering to values, but buying into a value space.
But I just before the show, Craig, I was actually looking, I saw a post on Facebook saying that the percentage of champagne that's being sold in the world has dropped significantly because the world is unhappy. And I was like, I wonder if that's true, right? But if you look at the global phenomenon and or the situation that the world's currently going through, like we're not the happiest place to be living, in the world anyway, right?
What's really interesting about the statement of associating a decline in spend on alcohol against happiness or unhappiness, maybe it's a price point conversation, because the one thing that we do note in many markets around the world, you see the consumption of alcohol actually increase during tough times. So that's a bit of an anomaly in the way it's defined in that particular report. Yeah, but just going back to the youthful consumers, Kevin, is about as much as 4 percentage points on the chart for those that are declining to buy product sustainability, and there's a much smaller percentage that are actually willing to pay these premium prices, Kevin. Then point 6 of this report talks to an area that we actually had dedicated focus on, and that was the wellness wave. And there's huge spend in this particular market with it's sitting at about $1.8 trillion of value, and it's growing at between 5 and 10% compounded growth annually, Kevin. And obviously in advanced economies, health and wellness products are most definitely, plus the service are really high demand over the last 2-3 years coming out of COVID. And that really, I think, has driven, the front end of the spear of the growth of this particular category. These categories are growing in emerging markets as well, not saying that the opportunity doesn't exist in emerging markets, but the intent to spend on health and wellness products in emerging markets is outpacing growth in advanced markets, purely on the basis that in many of those markets, the access to this particular segment is not been possible. And as the access becomes more possible with a limited spend, I think some of that discretionary buy-up space is definitely going into this particular category, Kevin. In
Yeah.
emerging markets, the report notes that the likes of China and India and the Middle East, the percentage of consumers who intend to increase their spend on wellness products and service is 2 to 3 times higher than the advanced North American and Canadian markets, Kevin. And again, it's important to note that it's not only Gen Z and millennials who are intending, or driving growth in this particular space, but the Gen Zers and baby boomers. Again, they're inevitably the ones who've had, bigger savings and higher access to money. They definitely are also back in the market and driving growth in this particular proposition. But I think it's important to understand that there are, different approaches across regions in the world. And the research, for instance, notes that 63% of baby boomers in China intend to spend more on fitness in the near future, while only 4% of the same cohort in India plan to do so. So it's really about understanding what the product mix and the association with that particular aspect of wellness is from region to region, and brands have to adopt and adapt their strategies to meet those changing dynamics in those markets, Kevin.
Yeah, Craig. I know we're running out of time, but just to add to the wellness, I've even noticed in our conversations, the importance of how we see wellness and the evolution of our wellness. For me, it's almost it's becoming a part of your economy of your future. You kind of go, well, there's pointless having lots of money if you're not healthy. So wellness is never going to go away. I think it's a big one.
Absolutely, it is never going to go away. That's a fact. And I would love to have a range of products or services in this particular space, because it's an evolving long-term future growth market. Just quickly then to pick up on the last 3 points from a headline point of view. Wellness, then focusing specifically on women, investment in women's wellness is definitely growing. Consumers in both advanced and emerging economies are showing much greater interest in spending on women's wellness products and services. And with that, one area of focus will always have adjacent parallel categories. So we're seeing a lot of focus in there. And just to quote a stat from the report estimates that closing the women's health gap could be worth $1 trillion annually by 2040, Kevin. That's a significant market value. Yeah. Then a wonderful term that jumped out in the article for me, and this is trend 8, and that is the term referenced as the new urban hotspots. And across all markets around the world, within a region, within a country, within a province, you're going to see various regions growing at a much more rapid rate than other regions in the same demographic makeup or the same economic makeup. And it's exciting to see how people are moving to seek new opportunities and a better quality of life. And they're moving from some neighborhoods where they've been stuck for the last few years, and they're seeing a spike of opportunity in others, and you're getting this constant move. We see it and call it the semigration of people moving to the coast or Cape Town and things like that. And here you're going to see the growth of cities around those interest groups and people who are striving for better lives, coming to the fore. And what's interesting in the States, you see that the cost of living is lower than in larger cities. So the smaller cities are definitely key area of focus. Growth and remote work opportunities are opening extensively. And on the back of that, the millennials and Gen Zers and boomers are then, moving into those environments and driving that particular growth aspect there, Kevin. And then the one area to focus on is invest in wealth. In at least wellness in terms of the closing points here. Offer premium products where they matter. Propel social digital experiences, and obviously the younger generations are really going to be the ones who are driving that. But then just in closing on this particular conversation, then the closing paragraph notes the following. In this consumer landscape, one in which standards, complexity, and stakes are all higher, leaders should understand the new nuances that define who the next shoppers are, what they care about, and how they shop. These insights, which should then inform strategic category and channel investments, can lead to long-term profitable growth and sustained competitive advantage.
Fantastic. I love it. Craig, thank you. I know it's been a long segment and we've covered a lot, but guys, we will be covering more about this and what the state of the consumer 2024, what's now and what's next looks like. Just to give us a quote for today, which is, I think, pretty applicable to this. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. And that's from Malcolm X, actually. So, yeah. Quite a significant statement.
Yeah.
Cool, great. Thank you so much, guys. If you want to catch it every Wednesday, Thursday at the lunchtime series, and Craig, yeah, I'm looking forward to more of what's now and what's next from a consumer's perspective. I think these are fascinating. The one that I think just lastly to the new urban hotspots. I think that's a whole thing I have never even considered But as you spoke through it, I was like, that makes so much sense. It's such a.
But next week we'll give the last three the full context of the discussion value that they deserve, like we have in the others. So I'll start next week with just a quick recap on the first 5-6 topics, and then I want to go and do a little bit more in-depth research on what the potential new urban hotspots in South Africa are as well. It would be great to see, as we mentioned, the semigration to Cape Town, the coastal movements and things like that. What are those cities experiencing and what are we seeing in terms of growth in those environments?
Absolutely. I think it's fascinating. Craig, thank you so much, guys. Catch us every week. Please remember to like and share and tune into the Lunchtime series. And for myself and Craig, have a fantastic week. We'll chat to you soon. Cheers for now.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a good one. Ciao.